Hey there, Louis Akabelis here. Thanks for stopping by. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can implement column level validation in a SharePoint online list. Now, before we get started, if you find this tutorial helpful, please hit that thumbs up below and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to stay up to date on the latest tutorials that I publish. Lastly, if you find my content helpful and you want to support me as a creator, consider purchasing a membership to my channel. You can click the join button below to learn more about the awesome perks that are included with my channel membership. Now let's go ahead and let's get started. All right, now what exactly is column validation in a SharePoint list? Well, column validation allows you to validate the data that is being entered in a specific column. So you can use validation to enforce that values being entered comply with business rules or parameters. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to cover 5 different scenarios. First, we're going to build validation that enforces that input values must be a specific length in terms of characters. Then we're going to go ahead and look at how to implement column validation with dates. And specifically, we're going to look at enforcing that values being entered in terms of dates are greater than today or the current date. We're also going to look at how to ensure that numbers being entered into a numerical column or field are between a specified range. Then we're also going to look at an example that parses through text and ensures that certain character patterns are found in that text. And then we're going to build out column validation that enforces that free text being entered in a column matches one of several words. Now let's go ahead and let's get started. All right, now you can see here that I have a SharePoint online list that is called customers, and this list is going to be used to record information about customers. Now, when you're building out your validation, you have 2 options. You can either implement your validation at the time of creating your columns, or you can create your columns and then go ahead and add the validation after the fact. Now, I'm going to start off by showing you how to implement validation that checks the length of a value that is inputted into a column. And specifically, we're going to create a column called phone number that enforces that the value being entered in that column or that field has to be exactly 10 characters. Now I'm going to go ahead and click add column here, and we are going to use a number type column. So I'm going to go ahead and select number, and I'm going to call this phone number. Now I'm going to scroll down, and I am going to set the number of decimal places to 0. And in this case, I am going to click on more options here. And then I'm going to turn off the thousands separator so that our telephone number just displays without any other characters. Now I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to turn off add to all content types. And you'll see here at the bottom of this menu, column validations. You want to go ahead and click on this. And this is where you can come to actually build out your formulas that will enforce the validation. Now, really important note, when you're building out column level validation, you cannot reference other columns that exist in your list. If you're looking to build out validation that references other columns in your list, that is list level validation. I am going to be publishing a video demonstrating how to implement list level validation as well. So you want to make sure that you subscribe so that you get that notification. And once that video is live, I'm going to post a card in the upper right-hand corner so that you can just click on that and watch that video. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and paste in the formula that I've pre-built. Now, you can see here a formula that is called len. And essentially what this does is this is going to check the length of a column that you will then input into the parentheses or the brackets here. So it's going to check the length of the value that's being entered in the phone number field or column, and it's going to make sure that it only accepts values that are 10 characters in length. Now, it's really important to note when you're building out formulas for column level validation, the formulas essentially must evaluate to either true or false. And if the formula evaluates to true, that means that the user is going to be permitted to actually save the data that they're entering in that field. And if it evaluates to false, then it means they're going to be displayed some sort of error message. Now, that is what's really cool about column level validation is if I scroll down, you can see here that you also have the ability to build out custom error messages so that you can provide guidance to your users as to what acceptable values are for that specific column or field. Now, before I paste in my error message here, I'm just going to click on this little information button and you can see that it says type descriptive text that explains what is needed for this column's value to be considered valid. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to paste in a message here and you can see it says phone number must be exactly 10 digits long. Now I'm going to go ahead and click save. And if your column was created in this case, then it means that your formula is accurate, there's no errors, and that your validation is implemented. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and test our validation, and I'm going to click on the new button to bring up the new item form here. Now I'm going to come down into my phone number field, and what I'm going to do is I am going to enter a value that is less than 10 characters or 10 digits. So I'm going to go ahead and try to save this. And you can see here that the error message is displayed at the top of the form and the error reads phone number must be exactly 10 digits long. And again, you'll see I cannot actually save this form. Now I'll go ahead and add another digit to the phone number field and I'm going to click save. And you can see here that once I entered a value that was 10 digits or 10 characters long, the SharePoint list form accepted that value. So that is how to implement column validation. And in this example, we were building out validation that checked the length of a value that was being inputted into a column in our list. All right, next we're going to look at how to implement validation that checks the values of dates that are being entered in a column in your SharePoint list. Now, specifically what I've done here is I've created a column called follow update. And what we're going to do is we are going to implement validation that checks and enforces that whatever value is being entered in this follow update column has to be greater than the current date. Now I've gone ahead and I've created my column here and I'm going to scroll down and I am going to click into column validation and I'm going to go ahead and paste my formula into this field. And essentially the way this formula works is we are going to say equals the follow update column. This is the column that we're creating right now in this step. And we're going to say greater than today, open bracket and closed bracket. So we can actually use other formula expressions such as today to help us enforce date values that are being entered. Now, an important note again, you cannot reference other columns when you're building out your column level validation. So in this case, it's totally acceptable to reference this column because again, we're building out validation that's going to check the values being entered into this specific column. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste in my error message here. And that error message reads the follow up date must be greater than today. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. And you can see here that my column was created and that means that my formula was accepted. Now I'm going to go ahead and test this and I'm going to put in a follow-up date value that is less than the current date. So I'll just click into the calendar here and I'll just select yesterday and I'll click save. And you can see here the error message displays that the follow-up date must be greater than today. And again, I cannot save this item. Now I'll go ahead and select a date in the future and I'll click save. And you can see here that this value was accepted and it's updated in my list. And again, that's because the date entered in the follow update column was greater than the current date. All right, now I just want to point out one additional thing when it comes to building out column level validation in SharePoint list. Now to demonstrate this, I'm going to click on the settings icon and come into the list settings. If I scroll down here, I can see a list of my columns that I've created, and I'm going to click into my follow update column. And if I scroll down, I can see the validation here. Now, what I wanted to demonstrate is that you can also manipulate your date formulas if you need to. So you can see here that I've gone ahead and I've updated my validation formula to say that the follow-up date must be greater than today plus 3. So if you wanted to, again, build out validation that enforces dates in the future, you can use expressions like today and then use simple arithmetic plus minus to add on additional dates. Now I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'll click back into my list. And now I'm going to create another record here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and enter a value in the follow-up date. So I'm going to go ahead and select tomorrow and click save. And you can see here that as a result of changing my formula, the validation is going to enforce that the value being entered has to be greater than today, September 1st, plus 2 days. So if I go ahead and change this to a day in the future and click save, then that value is going to be accepted. So that is how to implement column level validation using date formulas. Let's go ahead and let's look at the next example. All right, now next we're going to look at how to build out validation rules on free text columns that specifically look for parts of the string or text that is being entered. Now, specifically what we're going to do is we are going to build out a column called discount code, and we're going to implement validation that checks to make sure that the discount code that is being entered starts with the letters DISC. Now we're going to do this using the left formula. Now, if you're interested in learning more about the left and right formula and how to use those formulas in SharePoint lists, I do have a tutorial outlining how to use those formulas, and I've included the link in the description below. Now I've gone ahead and I've created my column here called discount code. Now I'm just going to go ahead and paste in my formula here. Now you can see that the formula starts with an if statement. So if, and then we get into using the left formula. And the way the left formula works is it is basically going to accept a column as a reference. So in this case, we're going to reference this column we're creating called discount code. And then we're going to put in a value that represents the number of characters that we want to search for. So this is saying, take the value that is being entered into discount code and specifically look at the first 4 characters from left to right. Next, what we've done is we have our validation check. So if those first 4 characters equal DISC, then true, accept what is being input in this column, and otherwise false, don't accept what is being put into this column. Now, just another note, if you are interested in also learning how to use if statements in SharePoint lists, I also have a very comprehensive tutorial outlining how to use if statements and build out complex if statements. Again, I've included the link for that video in the description below. Next, we're going to go ahead and paste in our error message. And you can see here that my error message in this scenario will be discount codes must start with the letters DISC. And I'll go ahead and click save. And you can see here that my discount code column was created. Next, I'm going to go ahead and test this. So I'm going to click on the new button here, and we can see our discount code field. And what I'm going to do is I am going to just put in some random text here, and I'll just say deduct 10, and I'll click save. And you can see here that our column is not accepting that. And you can see the error message that says discount codes must start with DISC. Now I'll go ahead and enter another value. And this time I'm just going to put DIS 10, and I'll click save again. And even though that is partially correct in that it starts with DIS, again, our parameters were that the first 4 characters must be DISC. So now I'm just going to go ahead and throw a C in here, and I'll click save. And you can see here that that value passes the validation, and therefore it was accepted. So that is how to implement column level validation that searches through parts of a string that is being entered. Now let's go ahead and look at the next example of column level validation. All right, now in the next example, we are going to look at implementing column validation that checks the range of values being entered in a number type column And essentially this is going to say that in order for you to save this data, the number that you're entering has to be between X and Y. Now, in the context of this list, we are going to create a column called discount amount, and that's going to be used to record the amount of a discount that was offered to prospective customers. Now you can see here I've already created my column, and I'm going to scroll down and click on more options. And I'm going to click on column validation again. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in my formula. Now you'll see here that this formula is another if statement. So this is saying if discount amount is greater than 1, and then we have our second if statement. So if discount amount is less than 10, so we can use nested if statements to build out our acceptable range. So if discount amount is between 1 and 10, then we're going to accept the input value, and otherwise we're going to reject it. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste in my error message here, and you can see that it reads discounts must be between 1 and 10%. Now I'll go ahead and click save. And you can see that our formula was accepted. Now I'll go ahead and test this. Now I'm going to come into our discount amount field, and I'll start off by putting in 0, and I'll click save. And you can see here that this value is not accepted. And again, because that's not within our allowable range of between 1 to 10%. Now I'll go ahead and put in 5. And you can see here that that value was accepted. And then again, just given that we're working with a range, I'll go ahead and put in 11. And you can see here that this value, again, is not within our range, and so therefore it wasn't allowed. So in this example, we looked at how to build column level validation that checks a numerical value that is being entered and ensures that that value is within a defined range. Now let's go ahead and let's look at the next example. All right, now in this last example, we're going to build out validation that checks whether or not an input value matches some specific words that we're looking for. Now you can see here I've built out a column called salutation. Now I'm going to scroll down and click on column validation. Now I'm going to go ahead and paste in my formula. Now in this formula, what we're using again is an if statement, and this time we're going to be using the if or statement, and that essentially allows us to look for multiple parameters, or in this example, multiple words. Now, again, if you are interested in learning more about how to use if statements in SharePoint online lists, I do have a comprehensive tutorial that outlines how to use if statements. I've included the link in the description below. You definitely want to check that tutorial out. Now, this formula starts with our if statement, and then the first thing we're going to do is add an or statement. So this is saying if salutation equals Mr. And then we're going to add our next block here, which again is or salutation equals Miss. And then again, salutation equals Miss. Then we're going to accept the value. Otherwise, we're going to reject it. So using this or block, we can actually look for multiple specific words, and this way we can enforce what is being entered into this column. Now, in this scenario, just a note, again, we likely wouldn't build out a salutation column as free text. We would likely use a choice type, but I'm just using this as an example to demonstrate, again, how you can use column level validation. Next, I'm going to go ahead and paste in my error message here, and you can see that says salutation must contain one of the following values. Now I'll click save. And we can see here that our column was accepted. Now I'll go ahead and click new. And I'm going to just type in some random text in the salutation field and click save. And you can see here the error message is displayed. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and just put in a partial match. So I'll put in MIS and I'll click save. And again, even though that is a partial match, it doesn't meet those predefined values that we built into this formula. Now, if I add another S here, then I'll click save. And you can see here that that value was accepted. I'll go ahead and I'll click new. And now I'll come in and put in Mr. And again, that matches our parameter. So it was accepted. So in this example, we looked at how to build out column level validation that takes a free text field and only accepts specific words that we hard-coded into our formula. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and talk a bit about the limitations of column level validation. Now, it's important to note that there are a few limitations when implementing column level validation in a SharePoint list. Now, most importantly, and as outlined in the tutorial, with column level validation, you cannot reference other columns from your list. Now, if you are looking to implement validation that checks the data being entered against other data stored in other columns in your list, then you want to be implementing list level validation. And the last limitation that I'll talk about is that when implementing column level validation, that validation is only going to be applied to new items that are being entered in your list. Unfortunately, validation will not be applied retroactively against existing items in your list. So again, it means it's only going to enforce that the data being entered complies with your business rules at the time of creating new items after that validation has been implemented. And that's it. This was just a quick tutorial showing you how to implement column level validation in a SharePoint online list. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please hit that thumbs up below and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest tutorials that I publish. I'm Louis Yakubalis. Thanks for stopping by. Talk soon.